has the industry been talking about it? You can either ask yes, in which case we'll go on and discuss it, or no, and we'll go on to the next question. But really, I've heard sporadic conversations about it, but have you, in your line of business, what's the industry been
I certainly
saying?
think it's not something that's really out there at the moment from what the business is putting out to customers. I think there's a definite desire for what it can offer going forward to be then used in our industry. I think with several of the manufacturers, the way that the devices are communicating now is very much like the Internet of Things as such. But it's what the output of that is going to really do then going forward for the rest of the industry.
So what is it? It's about really this whole environment of connected devices, presumably wireless. Is it a broader definition than that? I'm trying to work out what it actually means.
I think, looking at it more holistically, Clive, I think people talk about big data and businesses talking about big data and how important data is to clients, whether it's sales figures or the stats on how their clients react to product or whatever. And I think that the Internet of Things in our world, and Jason touched on it slightly, is about the information that the system can provide the user or the stakeholders in an organization about how their systems are being used, and to use that data to powerfully design their workspace and the strategy of their workspace based around real information rather than guesswork, which I think is what it's all been about in the past.
Is it going to force people to think more strategically about how they use AV, or is it just going to be a byproduct?
I think it's they'll have the knowledge and they'll have the real figures to say this is how our systems are being used. And I think as it evolves and as more devices and more elements of the built space become online and that information becomes usable and tangible, I think that yes, it will.
Simon, just the distribution industry, what's its take?
So from my perspective, because of the Maverick tie-up with Tech Data, it has become quite a big talked about subject in the business already, and we have a bit of a tie-up with Intel on one of our products, and they have a huge IoT team around the world. In fact, an IoT division which is targeted independently of the main business.
I suppose anybody with an interest in chippery is going to be absolutely over the moon when you talk about IoT. Samsung, anything with a system on a chip is going to be ecstatic. Yeah?
Exactly. And the numbers Intel were banding around were, I think there's something like 5 or 6 billion internet connected devices in the world today, but there'll be 20 to 30 billion by 2020. So it's...
Well, it's interesting to say that because the A Open on Monday, we were talking about digital signage, but they were talking about 75 billion screens being available in 2020, and they're 10 billion now. I'm assuming what they were talking about was handheld devices as well as, you're not telling me they're going to be that high number of conventional screens. They would all be cock-a-hoop if there were, but there must be. I think they didn't say so, but I'm sure they're referring to, bring your own device stuff,
Yes. It's an interesting thing. There's on the actually on LG stand, there's one little booth, one screen there, and this is the screen where you're using beacon technology. So you go online to the website of the shop. You then select the garments or clothes you actually want to select. When you walk into the store, up to the screen, the beacon technology recognises that you selected that from your phone, and then it brings up that information. That can even actually then actuate a coat hanger that lights up to say this is what you looked at before. So it's actually it has a different meaning in different areas, and for us in the AV space, it's understanding what that meaning is going to be to understand what the benefit is going to be for the end users.
You wonder how much is going to be infrastructure advantages and how much is going to be creating an experience for the customer. I suppose we're going to have different flavors of IoT, aren't we? I see it as a sort of infrastructure environment where everything interconnects seamlessly and you can't see anything. It'd be almost intuitive. It'd be lovely if we got to that nirvana. I'm sure we won't do. The IT world could try and do that for donkey's years, and sort of unified communications equivalent, never quite done it. So I'm just wondering if our fantastic interoperability, I suppose what has to happen for this thing to even get anywhere near serious, I suppose standards and interoperability, plug and play, all that sort of stuff. Are we anywhere near that? I don't think you're into proprietary environments that can do, I suppose, but when you'll want really solid interoperability for it to be cohesive, for things to work together seamlessly.
Sure. I think the AV guys need to consider it and embrace it now, though, because if they don't start planning for the future, they are going to get left behind, because the IT guys are now coming more and more into the what was the traditional AV market space, and the types of people we're employing now are guys with networking and IT experience rather than traditional AV experience, because we need that in our business, and they're the guys who need to unpick all of the various types of software and connectivity that the IoT will bring, and put it into something that becomes seamless. So I think there's a lot of work to be done.
I would agree with that, and I think that the biggest challenge for the industry is not around the built environment in respect of the delivery of hardware, screens on walls, control systems on tables. It's the challenges of understanding how the exchange system, the email system works, security system works, the building management system works, and being able to interoperate into those or intertwine into those in a way that is secure for the business, because I think business security is becoming more and more of a challenge, and I think the industry there is a skills gap, where people need to understand the architecture of a network and how a software platform will evolve into that environment to then deliver the information back out again. And certainly some of the deployments we've seen is you have a lot of what's called middleware, which is bespoke software platforms that sit in the middle to create that interoperability between all the different platforms. And I think you'll start to see some of the main manufacturers will move in that direction and see that having open APIs and having the discussions and an open platform which is more standards based actually benefits them, even though the client may pick and choose solutions or products from different places.
It's funny you say, obviously one of the really most talked about buildings in London at the moment is the Bloomberg building. No one really knows anything about it. You know who's working on it, but you don't know what they're doing. But I have heard that, interestingly, we had a big thing on audio yesterday, and I interviewed a chap called John May, who runs obviously the famous audio company, and I think they've chosen Constellation to run the building. That I do know, and I thought, how interesting is that? Because that's going to be a tweaked environment, and he was one of the first people to say, who analysed the AV industry. These audio guys don't really have anything in common with the AV world, but he was talking actually about completely forgetting about the technology. People now don't care about technology in a room or how it interoperates. A generational issue, if you don't mind me saying so. He said just put into a space what you need to have in there and start to work with whatever those components are and just assume they're going to work together. And I suspect that building is one of the first good examples of IoT with audio being at the centre of it. And you think, well, it's a very visual company, Bloomberg, but it's interesting to see with the zonal sound and an integrated audio environment how that's going to work. I think that might be one of the first clear examples of how these major environments might work together seamlessly in one of the most publicised buildings really we've seen, probably open next May, I think. I'm trying to get in and have a look. It's very difficult to see. And I do wonder whether you talk about middleware, and we're talking about something that's everywhere now, aren't we? So you think, well,
but in some instances we might as well be talking about Middle Earth, because no one really understands it.
Having covered IT for years, you think, well, my goodness me, IT's been trying to do this all the time. I think, is IT going to take over AV because it has the required knowledge? And of course, now our Infocom training standards are becoming more open and more detailed. You can see IT moving into that space, being genned up on AV skills, and going out, so right, we have our networking environment, we can move in and seamlessly encapsulate the whole thing. Certainly until you get perhaps global AV heads, like there is at Bloomberg, where you can have a strategic thought at a high level where the two areas merge to create a much richer environment. I just don't know.
I'd almost go one step further and say that if you look at the consumer of our solutions products and our work, what are they striving for? They're actually striving for their internal client services to work as one. So it's not a convergence of IT and AV, it's a convergence of HR, building services, technology. And I think that, as we move forwards, I think the convergence of AV and IT is happening. It's here. We're already there. I think actually what it is the other parties that are brought to the table and delivering a service to the client. You know, the internal client services team will deliver the building and all its component parts. And at the moment, what I've seen is a lot of very siloed, disjointed organisations who fight against each other because of the budget elements and everything else. And actually, if they combine together as an organisation internally and delivered one seamlessly considered project, I think that's where it's all going.
So I suppose it's going to change the way systems are designed and deployed then. Is that going to change how AV technology is sold then? And what sort of companies are going to sell these new types of solutions and environments, I wonder?
I think as Patrick was saying there, that I think we've already been changing in a way to become this more AVIT savvy type of businesses. It's been a need, especially with everything as soon as it starts to be connected on the network. And I think there's probably a natural progression for them moving on and actually sort of learning as we go along there. I mean, we do have some really clever people in the industry, and it's actually then using that knowledge and sharing that knowledge in order to get then the industry up to the next level of where it needs to go.
What sort of skills do you think will I'll address this both. What sort of skills do you think you're going to be needing, certainly in distribution? I imagine consultants are going to be cock-a-hoot with all this, aren't they? Right in the consultant's domain, I would assume. Especially complex environments, strategic thinking. But I mean, in a traditional business like yourself, you think, what's the role of the distributor going to be as time goes on?
Yeah, well, I think our guys need to move from talking about ANSI lumens and throw distance and aspect ratios and more into how you hang these things on the network and how you can use it in a BYOD environment, and that's the bit they need to be able to talk about now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely in our domain. One of the things that we're talking about now is what is the end goal, and the end goal is what does the client want to deliver at the end of it, and then layering all of the solutions into that. So the architecture, the technology. And again, we're starting to have conversations with clients. The technology should be seamless in the background. It shouldn't be the showpiece. And I think that's really important moving forward, that we understand the real need of the client, because that then delivers a solution which is valid and will be used.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've made a bit of a start on some thought. I think there's an awful lot of general serious discussion on strategy and looking at AV technology in a very different way, away from components, even though components are an essential part, into more solutions and overall use and how it fits into the business and we'll see what happens, won't we? Thank you all very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clive. Very welcome.